Hello, hello. We're going to be here in the future match. We have James on 5-color Fires, and we have Theodore on Mono Green Devotion. Devin, this is an exciting matchup.
Yeah, so this is, we got to see the 5-color Fires deck in action last round. Unfortunately for James, at least in my experience, I've been playing a lot of this Fires deck, and I found that the mono green matchup to be a little bit tough. It really kind of depends on kind of the outlook and the composition of James's deck. So we'll have to see if I can pull up the deck list exactly what we're working with. But I think this is traditionally not the greatest matchup, and with Theodore on the play, kind of a pretty significant advantage already starting off here with an elf.
Yeah. Not to brag too much, but last night we got done with coverage. I fired up a Moto League and just 5-0'd with the Fires list while we were watching the coverage to work on some stuff. So not to brag too hard, but I'm kind of the greatest to ever do it. As we see, Elf was the greatest ever do it from Theodore here into Kiora. But I have to agree, this matchup is really hard for the Fires deck. And I think it's actually really hard with the Yorion configurations because you have to have the right cards. And we see Theo playing Heart's Desire off Lovestruck Beast here to make a 1-1 after untapping with Kiora.
Right, and that's kind of one thing about the Yorion deck is like already because you're adding 20 cards to your deck, there's already a little bit of added inconsistency. You're just going to draw your powerful cards less often, but it's even more exacerbated with the Fires deck because this deck, given that it's given the cards that it's playing with stuff like Enigmatic Incarnation, requires a lot of tutors and a lot of one-ofs. So when you're playing this many one-ofs and playing an additional 20 cards, it makes it so you draw your high impact cards less often. Now, it looks like James does have a Chain to the Rocks that we can fire off here to take care of an elf, slow Theodore down a little bit, but that's it's not going to do a ton here. And we actually see him go for Nylea's Presence instead, just wants to develop and maybe try to dig towards some of those more powerful cards.
This is one of the things that I think we see kind of comes up, and you allude to a little bit. Because our mana base is so spread on colors and we're like trying to really be 5 colors with this deck, it is actually really hard for us to have Chain of the Rocks on 1. It's really easy to have it on turn 2. We have all the Triomes. But that means if you're ever on the draw against mono green, you're going to have these sort of things where they just get ahead of you. And we see Theo here slamming a Cavalier of Thorns, getting the draw from Kiora, and now hitting a Lair of the Hydra.
Right, this game looks a lot different if James's first land is something like a Sacred Foundry, because you can go Sacred Foundry, Chain to the Rocks, the Elf, and then turn 2 you're playing the Presence. But because James had a tap land and had a 2-drop and a 1-drop, didn't kind of wanted to try and not play off curve here, and also maybe just saving the Chain to the Rocks for some of the threats like a Cavalier of Thorns or an Old Growth Troll. So maybe gonna get a little bit paid off here. And I saw a second Chain to the Rocks as well, so you could even see something like double Chain to the Rocks kill the Cavalier and the Elf, which looks like what James is going to do here to kind of stunt Theo's growth a little bit. Turns off, it cuts down Devotion a lot, and Theo's going to be limited, a little bit more limited as to what he can cast. We'll need an untapped land to be able to cast Storm the Festival. Can always go towards that Lovestruck Beast if he wants, but yeah, definitely going to try and stunt Theodore's growth a little bit.
Yeah, and I was taking a moment here to look at, because we talked about last round the Incarnation deck, a lot of one-ofs and a lot of tutoring. The 5-color Fires deck that James here, it seems to also be playing Incarnation as well, but a little bit more on the heavy colors, but has some really sweet ones to tutor up, like Eldrazi Displacer, and we have that with Agent of Treachery. So we have some really strong in-game that if we can get to in time, and maybe Theo whiffs for a little bit, can actually maybe stabilize everything here, as we do see Chain of the Rocks answer the Cavalier, which removes some of that pressure on James.
Yeah, removes some pressure, also cuts down Theodore's Devotion, so maybe has a little bit less access to something like a Storm the Festival here. But looks like there's a Besage, which is that's a tough one because we can Besage the Chain of the Rocks. Well, you can't Besage the Mountain. You can still kill the Chain of the Rocks, get the Devotion back, get another Cavalier trigger and another Kiora trigger. So this is, that's obviously the downside to playing something like Chain of the Rocks, because just not being able, or against Besage specifically, that when that's your removal spell, compared to like something that would just kill the Cavalier outright, being able to get another trigger is kind of tough.
Yeah, and a super important thing to note here, and a little niche, is you see that Nylea's Presence is on the mountain, so it's already a mountain. But if that had been a forest or an island, and they had hit Nylea's Presence, Chain to the Rock would have fallen off because you no longer have a mountain. So sometimes you are playing with fire when it comes to this mana base, and getting Chain to Rocks to actually work. I have definitely lost some games to that.
Oh yeah, definitely something that comes up before. I think that's come up a couple of times for me. I was playing like the mono white
Mm.
devotion deck that also had chained, and I think my opponent did something similar where they just kind of like turned my land not into a mountain anymore, and the chain of the rocks fell off, and it
Yeah.
gets kind of awkward
But we do
sometimes.
see Theo here looking at his hand, just figuring out what he wants to do. Plays the Wolf of Haven on the untapped forest with the mana we have, and is going to activate Nykthos, I believe, for 6 devotion. Love Strike not in play yet.
Yeah, and chat pointing out we didn't search off of the Boseiju. Now I don't. I think Boseiju's a May, but obviously James doesn't know the top card of his deck, so I can't think of a strategic reason why you wouldn't search off the
Yeah, I
Boseiju
think that
there.
might
But
just be a miss thing. I think Boseiju is a May. I'm not 100% sure. Um, looks like we were reading it. Looks like our floor judge also caught it. Kind of easy. Sometimes what happens with floor judges is they're just like us. They're players. They're not sure. And they have to double check the text on their card as well. And you'll see them kind of step away, look at their phone, and be like, actually, let's have a moment here. And so looks like this was a May ability. And so we're continuing onward potentially. It looks like we're talking to the judge. But yeah, we're just kind of replaying what happened here. Yeah, let's just head back to the booth. Actually, whatever. We don't have to watch the judges do that. I have enough of my life, taking up explaining things, whatever. It's fine. I want to talk to you though about this 5-color Fires Incarnation deck because we've seen it twice now. It looks kind of spicy. We're seeing 2 different builds. Our last round with Cliff had a bunch of really big creatures, Coma, Titan of Industry. Looking here at this round though, not as many big drops outside of the one Agent of Treachery, at least in the main deck. Do you kind of like
right, we
that
don't.
sort of?
Yeah, we don't see the coma here, but like you did mention, which I believe our last player Cliff did not have, was the Eldrazi Displacer, and that's kind of, as you alluded to, a way to kind of go over the top, especially when combined with something like Agent of Treachery. You could see, and with Fires of Invention, you don't have to tap your mana to cast the spell, so you could see something like, say Fires of Invention in play, then you maybe you have a Binding in play, cast Incarnation for free, sacrifice the Binding, go get an Agent. Already, maybe you already have the Displacer, and then you can just still have 6 mana to be able to do that twice, and that steals 3 of your opponent's permanents. And with the Devotion deck, because it has stuff like Wolfolo Haven and Old Growth Troll enchanting lands, maybe you can take kind of multiple permanents with just one of those activations, or you can steal all their planeswalkers. So, if we are able to get to that end game, that is something that we definitely want to be able to do, and maybe we can try and set up. But yeah, no coma. Looks like there's an additional copy of Glasspool Mimic here, a couple of Omnaths, but yeah, some really cool stuff we can tutor up here. And this is kind of the nightmare matchup for the Fires deck. But if you have a fast Incarnation plus a Leyline Binding, you can kind of steal games that way. Just a fast Agent of Treachery.
Yeah, we kind of mentioned it before. The green deck sees a lot of cards, right? And actually has like a weird amount of card selection despite being a mono green deck and a weird amount of card advantage. But there are moments where your deck does play like 32 mana sources. So you're going to need to actually like have those sort of patches where things can come through. And like you mentioned, if we get an early binding, maybe to hit a Kiora, and then we slam the Enigmatic Incarnation, we can go grab the agent. And then sometimes the agent just takes the one good thing. We've seen in the Green Mirror Stay a bunch how Karn can kind of lock things down. Well, if you take your opponent's Karn, that's a pretty reasonable place to be. And then suddenly they don't have access to that. And maybe they grab something like Meteor Golem, right? And now it's like, okay, you're going to kill your own Karn? Kind of an awkward place to be.
Yeah, I was curious real quick. I wanted to see if we had any artifacts we could get off the Karn, but no artifacts to get in the sideboard. But yeah, that's something. And just if especially in those situations where if the Karn is played and maybe you preemptively get something like a Sky Sovereign or like you said, a Meteor Golem, you now take the Karn, so you stop them from getting maybe the Chainville or the combo piece that they needed, like the Pestilent Cauldron, and now they have this Meteor Golem, which I guess can maybe try to break up the combo but if you already have the Displacer in play, then they can't even set that up because you just have 3 mana to blink the agent anyways. So
Yep. Yeah. Apparently, the ruling from the judges, the communication error, which violates the policy. So the player cannot decline to search, and so we're gonna let the player search library. Can't be assumed to have searched. Sorry, it's technically the vernacular. And so with this one, it's different than something of old. And so that being the case, James is going to allow to go find a Triome, which is going to be nice for James, and get a little warning. And these sort of things do happen. Not a big deal at the end of the day. But back into the game here. So looks like we're just fixing this here. And I believe Theo was about to cast Karn the Great Creator. Looks like it is on the battlefield here. We're going to see what Theo wants to do with that card. Maybe find some tech cyborg card.
Yeah, there's a die on the battlefield. There's a 3, which I'm guessing that's probably mana floating. So, or no, that's the die on the card. So I don't actually know if Theodore has any mana floating. So maybe he can't go towards something like a God Pharaoh statue, which is maybe something that he would want to get in these spots, but because the God Pharaoh statue would be kind of nice, preventing James from being able to cast a Fires of Invention or an Enigmatic Incarnation on this turn, because that's probably the way that James gets back in this game, is going like Fires Incarnation and setting up a big turn that way. Because James doesn't really have a lot of ways to catch up. If we take a look at the deck list, there's really there's no sweepers or anything like that. And yeah, so it looks like Theodore is going to go. Well, there's mana floating because there's a Pestilent Cauldron being cast on the back half of it.
So I think you were right. I think it was 3 in the pool, and we just moved it to the Karn, and then we used the Wolf Willow Haven to get 5 for the Druid of Burst. So we're getting back a Cavalier Thorns and a Cure. So I think you were right. It just happened to be perfectly lined up with Karn there. So a little silly situation where that Pestilent Cauldron exile itself. Probably no way to get that back, right?
Yeah, isn't that so? It's kind of funny because I'm pretty sure the back half of that card was designed specifically to exile so that you couldn't loop it with other Pestilent Cauldrons. But funnily enough, that's the only reason that it's so busted in this deck, is because it exiles itself. You just get it back with cards. So maybe obviously Karn they didn't have Karn in mind when they designed this card, but just a really 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 funny interaction.
Yeah, really, really the most noble intentions from the good people at WotC there, but it's hard to design around every card ever, right? Even just in the Pioneer format, it's a huge task to try and balance everything. And they do such a great job, but every now and again, something slips through the cracks. As we see a Fabled Passage here, searching up the land.
Yeah, and you saw James thumbing through his deck here. These Incarnation decks actually play a Yorion in the main deck in addition to the Yorion Companion. And the reason for that is because when you have a 4-mana enchantment, like if you say go Fires of Invention plus Incarnation, you can sacrifice the 4-mana enchantment to get the main deck Yorion if you already have like an established battlefield. And we see fetching a Waste here off of the Fabled Passage could be an indication that we're trying to get to that Eldrazi Displacer.
Yeah, if I'm Theo, I'm like, what is happening? I'm also like, can't even do it, Fable. But yeah, the way Fable works is you actually can go and grab that Waste there, and looks like we're going to see James cast another Chain to the Rocks on the mountain and answer the Cavalier again. And then it looks like we're going to turn this Nylea's Presence into some other card. A lot of 3-drops in this deck. Eldrazi Displacer, which we've alluded to. And, if James has the Leyline Binding lined up, that could be what we're setting up right now. We also have things like Skyclave Apparition, which will KO the Karn. And exiling the Karn, too, really matters because you do see Cauldron looping Karns when you actually kill them. So Skyclave Apparition, actually a weird all-star in the Pioneer format, and the decks that can't afford to play it.
Yeah, looking at the options here, like you said, use the Skyclave Apparition. There's a Renegade Rallier, an Anointed Peacekeeper, a Deputy of Detention, and then the ones that we had already mentioned. I'm guessing you want to go for a removal spell on the Karn here, and it looks like that's what we're going to do with the Skyclave Apparition, which does make sense because if you don't do that, obviously Karn can downtick to get back the Restorative Burst again, which is just more threats. Obviously, the Restorative Burst did already kind of get its money worth. You already have the 2 spells that it got. But you just kind of have to maybe hope that Theo misses on this Cavalier trigger or something along those lines, because it's there's a reasonable, maybe not reasonable, but there's a chance that Theodore could just kind of kill James here this turn. Maybe hit something, Mill Storm the Festival, hit a second Nykthos or something like that.
Yeah, and we see a lot of pseudo wins from the mono green deck, right? Where it essentially wins the game. And wow, Theo drew a Nykthos, going to activate our Nykthos here with the trigger on the side, just to make sure we don't mill into another Nykthos. Just make 5 mana here off the Nykthos. 6, sorry, Wolf Willow Haven was tapped with the lands there. It tricked me. So 6 there so we can cast Storm of the Festival. But yeah.
Yeah, good sequencing here from Theo. Play the Cavalier, trigger on the stack, float with Nykthos. You want to do that in case you hit a second Nykthos, which he did, and a Storm the Festival, and he drew the other Nykthos anyways. So, yeah, we're going to be able to flashback that Storm the Festival, and we already have the Kiora rolled up too, so that's even more mana. Yeah, This one could just be over.
Yeah, this might actually end, or it could be one of the pseudo ones we talked about. We're going down to 2 mana here, casting the Lovestruck Beast. That's going to net us some extra mana and a card here. Might pick up something like a land or elf or anything along those lines to get some extra devotion. We'll see before we reactivate Nykthos off Kiora. We're going to see Nykthos get activated here, though, for 7 now. So now we have 7 left in the pool. We use I guess we have 8, sorry, because it was 6 before, and we used 3 and then activate again. So 8 in the pool. Going to play Old Growth Troll. You squint your eyes. It looks a little like Dark Ritual right now, drawing another card. And I think
lots of Dark Rituals here with the Old Growth Troll, the Kiora, the second Nykthos. Just Theo's basically got 12 Dark Rituals in his deck at this point.
Yeah, and we see Theo just go ahead and play Nykthos from hand before activating the other one. Gonna put a Wiffle Haven on the Nykthos, so now it taps for, I believe, a 10 Devotion, and also generates a green extra. So 11 mana there. We'd used 3 before. I believe we're at 16 mana now floating. This is a casual turn. And I do believe we have the Wiffle. I'm sorry, we do believe the Cure activation still available to us, which we might do before Storming the Festival here. And,
yeah, as long as we have enough mana left over, as long as we can leave at least 2 in the pool to be able to storm into a Nykthos or a way to untap a Nykthos, then Theodore can basically just kind of keep going.
Yeah, and I think Theodore does have Karn the Great Creator in hand, and we have enough mana to go Karn, wish for the Chain Veil, play the Chain Veil, activate a few times, and then just untap your Kiora to untap the Chain Veil and just hope your Storm hits. And it's like not that unreasonable to just have the Chain Veil in play and just sort of, if things go poorly, well, we have it later and it's fine. And we still have all these other things in the graveyard. Oh, I guess you actually just have the win, right? If you can kill your own Kiora minusing, or you just Legend Rule, that works too. Then you have the Restorative Burst, and that should be the combo here for Theo. So if you haven't seen this yet, I know I alluded to it earlier in the day, and Devin, I told him I wouldn't go through it if it wasn't necessary, but it looks like we might have to play through it for a minute. Basically, what happens is your Karn and your Kiora ping-pong back and forth, activating the Chain Veil a bunch of times. You gain a bunch of life, and then you play Pestilent Cauldron for its actual self, mill them out because you do it equal to life gained, which is gained incidentally through this process. So, going to be the win here. And so, James is just going to pick it up and, time to talk about here. Let's talk about their deck list, though. And important, James not make you play through it. Otherwise, Theo gets to see everything. James's deck list here, big, chunky Yorion deck. But in the sideboard, we have 4 Rending Volley, 3 Leyline of the Void, 3 Doe and Veto, the Yorion needed, Dragon Lord Adarkar, Radiant Flames, Deafening Clarion, and Archon of Emeria. Anything that you're really liking here, Devin?
So, Rending Volley, no. We're going to leave that one in the sideboard. Leyline of the Void is actually kind of somewhat interesting to kind of, if you can stop the Cavalier Death trigger, you can stop Old Growth Troll triggers, and then also Storm the Festivals that get milled over or just cast from hand. Those no longer can be flashback from the graveyard. So it's always an interesting card. I don't think that you want to bring it in. I think that if you're bringing in Leyline of the Void, you want to have maybe a little bit more of an aggressive game plan, like you're trying to end the game as quickly as possible, and the Leyline just buys you a little bit of time that you might need. So, James's deck is a little bit slower, so I might not want to go towards that. The cards that I do like, though, are the 1-ups. The Archon of Emeria, very good at stopping the combo turn because Theo can't cast more than one spell. Dragon Lord Adarkar, being able to clean up a Karn the Great Creator or a Kiora. And I also like the Sweepers as well, especially on the play. Sweepers against the Llanowar Elves, I think, could play some good cleanup duty.
Yeah, have to agree. I do think you maybe want Dogan's Veto just because your Yorion deck has so many weird things that don't line up well. You might have a few extra spots, and those non-creature spells are the things that actually matter in this matchup. So we might see like 1 or 2 Dovin's Veto come in, which feels like a weird thing, right? But happens more often than you would think.
Right. I was thinking about like the way that James wins is kind of having like those fast Fires Incarnation draws, and when you have Fires because it prevents you from casting spells on your opponent's turn. But maybe you bring in the vetoes to kind of play towards the worst case scenario where you don't have the Fires. But yeah, definitely something can counter a Karn on a key turn or something, maybe counter a Flashback Storm.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see here. Theo's sideboard, if we want to pull that up real quick, we totally can. It looks like the players are still finishing up their sideboard. This is pretty stock. There's nothing unusual here in the sideboard. It's all wish targets. And a little cast revision for you. I can see the players shuffling up and getting ready. Theo put the cauldron in the sideboard and just started shuffling and has since been hanging out a little bit while the opponent shuffled up a little bit more. So we're actually going to have the players here coming down here resolving mulligans. But yeah, Theo doesn't have to shuffle or sideboard that much. A big edge. You can't misboard with this deck if you never board.
One card I want to ask you about, because I haven't actually seen this one in play yet, and I've seen it at a couple of deck lists, but that is Karn's Silex. So this is a card from Dominaria United that we haven't gotten to see a little bit here, but I know that people had talked about this initially as a Karn Wishboard target, and I don't think a lot of people are really in on it. What do you think about this card?
Yeah, Karn Silex is an interesting one. It's kind of like a Wrath, right? Or a Pernicious Deed type effect. I think one of the things about the Karn sideboard, and we joked about this yesterday, is that there are some cards that you have in these corner case scenarios, and they rarely kind of come up in a tournament, but you play them because you think they're the best thing for the weekend. I think Karn Silex is an example of that, where it is kind of okay against the aggro decks as a sweeper. And if you're like kind of at parity, you can play this as a way to like, okay, before the mono white player gets brave, I can clean things up in a way that something like Ratchet Bomb can't. But Ratchet Bomb's better against the creativity decks that we see, the indomitable ones, not these sort of creativities. And so you kind of like picking your battles there. So I think this is kind of a statement like, hey, I kind of want to have a little bit of game if I fall super far behind the mirror. Maybe I want to be able to beat the mono white decks, and I don't think I'm going to have to beat that many indomitable creativities in this format. I did all that yesterday in Modern, and so I'm going to have this over Ratchet Bomb. But it's not a card that I would say has earned a spot like Heart of Kieran, which is a combo piece, but also just like a value thing you can search for.
Yeah, it seems like most of the wish boards are kind of like the same, around 10 or so cards, and there's some sort of variation with the last the last 5 or so.
Yeah. And that's one of the things too about this deck is like we joke like how it's so easy to never sideboard, but picking those little spots and having something like Ratchet Bomb on the right weekend versus Karn Silex does make or break tournaments. As we're going to see, Nylea's presence here for James drawing a card and now has all the land types thanks to that. Really cool to see that card kind of see play thanks to the printing of Leyline Binding. Again, Theo did have the turn 2 Wolfwillow Haven after doing nothing on turn 1.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that both players have two mana land enchantments, but one of these actually makes a mana. The cool thing about Nylea's presence, a couple things in this deck. Obviously, you mentioned Leyline Binding, but the fact that it both replaces itself and is a 2-mana thing that you can sacrifice to Incarnation on curve, it does kind of a bunch of cool things for this deck, and it's a pretty sweet inclusion here. What is this card?
It's Commune with Nature, I believe, or Commune with. It's like look at the top 4, put a land or enchantment into your hand.
Okay, Commune. I think it's called Commune with Spirits. I see it on the deck list here. Okay,
gotcha. Commune Spirits. Yeah, and we picked up the Nylea Triome. Put that in hand. Never losing the Triome game here.
Well, that one's not fancy art, so
that's true. Yeah,
minus 1 point.
I feel like it's really
you only get points if they're the fancy arts.
Dang. Okay, I see how it is. Well, Theo is gonna play another Wolfwillow Haven here. We might see a Kiora. It looks like it's gonna be an Old Growth Troll. And we are going to see Leyline Binding on that Old Growth Troll. And this is kind of what James needed, right? That you were talking about.
Yeah, this is if we see a land and an Incarnation here. Can you imagine land Incarnation, sack the Binding, steal your forest that has 2 havens on it?
Holy moly. Look at me. I'm the ramp deck now, says James. But looks like James probably doesn't have it. If he does, it's the sickest slow roll of all time. And I love it. I love a good slow roll. That's why I can't play Burn. I would just sit there and tank on my Lava Spike and then be like, I guess I bolt you? Anyways,
I guess you're dead.
Tap it 4 mana. Probably going to be Karn the Great Creator, although maybe it might be a little floating action happening thanks to the Wolfwillow Havens.
It's like we put a Karn to the front, so maybe going to go towards that. Now the question is, what do you want to get here? You know that James doesn't have an Incarnation because he obviously would have slammed it, and that would have been cast. So what are we trying to play around here? You can get something like Pithing Needle, but I don't really think there's a lot of stuff in James's deck to be able to Pithing Needle. Most of the cards just kind of have triggered abilities, not really activated abilities. So I mean, I guess you could go to a land maybe if you're missing a land for Storm. Not sure. We'll have to see what Theo gets here.
Yeah, it looks like Theo's kind of thumbed Mir going to the front. And this Karn's probably not for this world because James did not pick up the Yorion, right? So either James was trying to bluff something or has an answer here. And it does look like, we're just going to use that Triome we had shown up. Sure. Rather draw a random card maybe than get the Yorion. Try and find that actual Enigmatic Incarnation. It looks like we do another Nylea Triome.
Just keep them flowing. Keep them flowing.
Picked up a...
I think that was a black card, Mason.
Is that Leyline of the Void?
I believe it was a Leyline of the Void.
Is that
that was the one that we weren't sure that James was going to bring in. I mean, it is interest, or maybe it was a Fabled Passage. It's hard to tell.
It is hard to tell. It is worth noting, like I mentioned, Dovin's veto is maybe the thing you want to do, and you mentioned how that doesn't work with fires. It might be Leyline the Void, just like a 1 or a 2 of it. And it's like if I draw it, I draw it. If not, I can put it off Fires of Invention, and it does stop them from kind of going all out. And then maybe you buy a turn or two, which is sometimes all you need. Anyways, Leyline the Binding here is going to take the Karn, and it looks like James going to take a second to think. Does have that second Nylea Triome in hand that we saw get cycled into off the first one, so maybe it's thinking about having Yorion. Looks like, Theo is going to besage you the Leyline Binding, and we're going to search our deck here, as we've learned. You must search.
Yeah, Theo was holding up the Leyline Binding just in case that James had something like that Enigmatic Incarnation, because that would have been kind of an easy target for that. But now that we've kind of not committed anything else to the battlefield, well, besides the binding, now we can go ahead and get that Karn back, reset the loyalty, and then Theo does have 6 mana, so a land would allow him to cast the Meteor Golem, which would blow up the other Leyline Binding, which would also get you back the Old Growth Troll, kind of reset the battlefield and give Theo a lot of advantage. So we'll have to see what Theo goes to. You could also see something like maybe Theo doesn't have a land. You could maybe get a God Pharaoh statue, but James does have a decent number of mana in play, so not necessarily might not want to go towards that statue because you can kind of just easily pay for spells.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting. The Meteor Golem feels kind of like it's just getting back an Old Growth Troll, but it does stop the Enigmatic Incarnation, like you mentioned, right? So kind of, more than meets the eye here, a little bit of a Transformer situation.
Yeah, and actually, if Theo doesn't have a land, you could just get the treasure ball from the sideboard. So yeah, I think that's a pretty easy play for me here. Just being able to, because the one thing that you are worried about is that Incarnation coming down, sack the binding, get the agent, steal the land, which produces 3 mana. That's kind of a massive backbreaking play. Where if you get the Leyline Binding off the battlefield, that play is no longer an option. So definitely something that Theo wants to consider here. Also could go to again that statue. It looks like we're going for Cauldron here, which does read by the Besaju, which is interesting. So must already have a land rolled up then.
Yeah, probably has the land rolled up, and this might be a situation like you mentioned where we're just going to Golem, and then that's for future turns, which is something we see a lot with this deck. You just kind of grab the Cauldron, and then just be like, cool, I'll use you in like 3 turns, just sort of save you some time there. We are going to see James here, looks like cycle the Triome again at end of turn, trying to draw into some action. Looks like we drew another Nylea's Presence.
So yeah, now with that Leyline Binding no longer on the battlefield, Incarnation still can sacrifice the Nylea's Presence to be able to get a 3 mana card, maybe like a Skyclave to kill the Karn, or potentially the Old Growth Troll if James wants to. But yeah, really still looking for that Incarnation. Without it, there's not, James's deck doesn't have a lot of threats per se in cards that Theo cares about, with the exception of that Incarnation. You could start drawing some of the one-ofs. So I guess like you could maybe draw the Skyclave, or maybe something like, no, I guess the Tolsimir is not that great on this battlefield. I'm trying to think of some of the other spicy one-ofs that we could just naturally draw that would actually kind of help the battlefield here. Maybe the Anointed Peacekeeper. The Deputy wouldn't be too bad.
Yeah, a lot of interesting things going on here. Looks like are we casting the Moon Cleric? Oh, we're casting Renegade Rallier. Sure, gonna grab another Fabled Passage and fetch again. Okay. There's a what is the exact card's name? It's like Moonshire Cleric or something like that. It's,
the Moon-Blessed Cleric.
Moon-Blessed Cleric.
Enchantments.
Yeah, I thought we were doing that for a second when we weren't shuffling our deck. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's really good. Yeah, this card just gives you, a 5th copy of kind of all your enchantments. And so often it's going to find Fires or Enigmatic Incarnation, but, can find Chain to the Rocks and stuff like that too. So, a really versatile card in this deck.
Yeah, James has a ton of mana in play, is not really worried about something like the God Pharaoh statue, but really just needs to find some way to kind of get more pressure. Theo's just been kind of sitting here, hasn't had a ton of mana development, had the Nykthos that turn, but hasn't really, had that explosive turns that we're used to seeing in Mono Green, just kind of playing more of, I guess you could call it a fair game with Karn. But yeah, there's not a ton really going on here, but James just hasn't really been able to capitalize because, outside of Incarnation, there's not a ton of live action cards in James's deck.
Yeah, and you might be wondering, what's that token? That's actually official NRG token. So Theo's team won the showdown with Connor Mullally 2 months ago. We saw Connor last night in our finals, and that's their token. So it's actually their whole team, Devin, on a goblin shaman, and they're all kind of dressed like goblins for Fable the Mirror Breaker. So if you kind of squint, you can actually see Theo is the one in the middle there, and that's why Theo kind of paused and said, "Don't worry, I got you," and pulled out one of the tokens, which is one of the things you get for winning the showdown is you get a token, which is so exciting to have you and your friends immortalized in that way, and also on such a strong card too.
I gotta get some of those
they're
tokens
great
now.
I was actually going to get some from Connor this weekend, and then now I'm here in the booth with you instead. So all I got to do was commentate Connor's.
He can mail it to you.
Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. Goblin shamans can't be trusted all the time. They're always up to no good. And Theo, kind of taking a minute here, double checking the mana, seeing, okay, how close am I to doing combo? Should I just get a Godfair statue? What is my best way to kind of lock this game out here? Because Theo is in a weirdly ahead or advantageous position, but not by so much that's insurmountable.
Right. Yeah. We're not used to, there's not something like the, 12 devotion with a Karn and a Kiora and all this stuff in play. It's more of like kind of a small ball type of game. Theo decided to grab the Sky Sovereign, which kind of makes sense. And we still know he has that copy of Pestilent Cauldron in his hand. But yeah, oddly, this is almost like more of it's weird to say this, but kind of more of a reactive draw from Theo. We saw the Besiju, the Meteor Golem killed the permanent, the Sky Sovereign's going to kill a permanent, a lot of removal spells, which you don't normally see from this mono green deck. So
100%. It looks like we're going to Lovestruck Beast for the Heart's Desire, and then cast the Lovestruck Beast with the mana, and then activate our Nykthos for 6 devotion here. Lovestruck Beast, a big get for these mono green decks, a good find. Makes it so the aggro matchups are a little easier by having more 1-drops you can get in the way and just a huge body. And then in matchups like this, turns out just having a 3-mana 5/5 on turn 2 off an elf is very strong and sometimes let you steal bad matchups.
right, yeah, the mono green deck is typically not the best against the aggressive strategies, but as you said, just having this 3-mana 5/5 that's really nearly impossible for a red deck to be able to kill outside of something like a Roast, which they don't usually play anyways. They usually go towards Lava Coil, which doesn't touch the Lovestruck Beast. So yeah, just a massive addition here. The 1/1 chump blockers, the 5/5. Also, the fact that it draws you a card with Kiora, you can justify pretty much any 4 power greater creature when you have something like a Kiora in your deck too.
Yeah. Next, we'll see Steel Leaf Champion enter the deck for the beatdowns.
Now we're talking.
Yeah.
Now we're talking.
We're going to get a little rummaging happening here off the Fabled Mirror Breaker. Discard 2, draw 2. Oh, yeah. Production pulled it up. 5/4, 3 pips. Hello. Choo-choo. Yeah. I think we picked up land and another Chain to the Rocks here for James. Looks like we're counting if we can Yorion play and Flicker. That will get us 2 draws off the Nylea's Presence. We might have to sacrifice the goblin so we can make a treasure token to do that, but we're kind of low on gas.
Yeah, there was a card that James drew. It looked like there was a Triumph and something else, but I couldn't quite make out. It was some kind of promo. Lots of foils in James's deck, so I couldn't quite see what he drew. Looks like we are going to the Yorion, I think.
Yeah, looks to be that we have the mana to do that. We haven't tapped it yet. But sometimes there's a little bit of shortcutting happening and players just thinking through things. And sometimes it's nice to visualize the board. And when the information's already open, the same way you might see someone line up attackers and blockers, you're seeing James here being like, okay, if I tap all my mana, play this Yorion, what can I even draw and do? Or is it better just to cycle the Triome and try and hit, Incarnation or something? It looks like we've landed on Yorion is the play. The only place you can still do it. And we're going to actually flicker the Fable again, which I kind of love.
Yeah, especially in more of this, I'm not going to call it a low resource game, but this game where Theo's not necessarily presenting as much of a battlefield, you might have the time to kind of convert these extra cards that you're getting off of the Yorion. You're going to get another blocker 2 as well here, so you have effectively 3 blockers. The boat gets crewed, maybe kill a blocker that way. Unfortunately, maybe we don't have another token. Would love to see the second Theo token, but yeah, this is trying to basically set up shop here, and in hopes that James can find something like an enigmatic incarnation off the top, because that's really what he needs.
And I love James holding the Triome there. Your Fable the Mirror Breaker is gonna let you discard that, and you already have so much mana. Just try and find a real spell, and just prepare for the worst case scenario. If you hit a bunch of lands off that flickering of the Nylea's Presence, you might just want to have that land. So tight play from James.
Yeah, we're gonna do some quick math here. So boat's gonna get stood up from the Karn. Now, looks like we're gonna go for a Storm the Festival. I think Theo's lining
Yeah,
that
Theo
one
has
up.
6
Yep.
devotion.
So we got 3, 4. Yep, it's exactly 6 devotion. So that's enough to cast that. I'm trying to think. We have lethal, right? So we have 5 attackers. The boat attacks, kill a token, 2 blockers, block those 2. That's currently, I think, 8 getting through, if my math is correct. But yeah, this is huge. There's a good chance that Theo can just end the game this turn.
Yeah, I think I agree on your math on the like what gets through when it comes to lethal and not. But we did hit Cavalier and Kiora, so we're actually dangerously close to completing the combo. And we're going to see a Besage get pit in the land zone here. We still have the Kiora to untap the Nykthos, so now we're up to 9 devotion. We also have an Oath in this in hand. That'll put us up to 10 devotion. We do activate Nykthos here in a second. But first, we have to look at the top 3, see what we can find. And if we found something like Karn, that should be the game. But instead, we found Cavalier, which will give us more looks, more devotion.
Yeah, the fact that like just Cavalier milling over cards, getting you closer to Storm the Festivals, just the Cavalier with a Cure in play gets to look at 6 cards towards the second copy of Storm, and that's why this deck is so good and consistent. It's just it like you said, we say it every time. It just looks at so many cards between the Cavs and the Oaths and the Cure draws, and it just has so much power, so much consistency, and not this is why it's the best deck in the format for sure.
Yep. We do see 11 mana made here, and we have a Karn here, so we're dangerously close to being able to just have the full win. Looks like if we play the Cavalier and hit another Nykthos, we have the win. We have the straight combo. If we don't, we can also flashback the Storm the Festival and just try to find something that way and sort of just kind of set up to go again. You actually can just find a Storm off. Sorry, you can find Nykthos off the Storm, and that works as well. It's the same mana cards and more mana, so we probably won't see Theo do that, but looks like Theo is going to play the Karn. Maybe just has it rolled up as is, with there's like something, another Cure or something in hand I can't quite see. But that should put us down to 7 mana floating in the pool. We do have 3 up there at the bottom, so that could be a part of this whole interaction.
Yeah, there is a Cure in the graveyard as well, and we do know about the Pestilent Cauldron, so I think Theo does have this one rolled up.
Oh, Theo already put the Cauldron in hand. I forgot from a couple turns ago. Yeah. So that should actually be the game. So we have 7. We have Chain Veil. We're going to activate it. Now all of our Planeswalkers get additional activation. We have 2 mana floating because the Wolfwillow Haven is on 2 of them are on 1 land. So now we have the extra Cure. We untap the Nykthos. We make some more mana. We have enough mana to where we can burst, play Kiora, untap. That new Kiora will have 2 activations. So worth noting, the Chain Veil's ability stack on how many times your Planeswalkers activate, and is a thing that matters for future Planeswalkers. It doesn't affect only the ones in play. It reads like it would affect only the ones in play, but it's weirdly putting a new game rule into effect. So that means like next Kiora, we get to untap Nykthos and the Chain Veil, and we get to kind of do this all over again and be up in activation so we can activate Nykthos again. And you get the idea. We're going to gain a bunch of life, pick up the Restorative Burst, gain some more life, play the Cauldron, and then mill James out despite being a Yorion deck.
Yeah, we like to call this pick things up and put them down, and then pick things up and put them down again. This is kind of where we're at this point. I mean, I'm pretty sure Theo has infinite. I may be just going through the motions, maybe explaining this to James. But yeah, this is at a certain point you can just say, I would like to repeat this loop X amount of times.
Yeah,
and that should be all she wrote.
Yeah, once you kind of demonstrate that it's an actual loop, and we haven't played the second Karn yet, so that might be the break point here. Theo hasn't completed it, because while it is easy to talk about, there is a lot of movement that has to go on. So we see Theo here point out like, hey, each of my Karns are going to activate a bunch of times, so I can wish for my whole sideboard as well. So this Karn has another extra activation. I'm going to get the Bank Buster, play the Bank Buster. That's how I get the black mana for the Cauldron. That is how I'm going to beat you. And James extends the hand. So congratulations to Theo here. Moving on to 3-0. And we're going to try and get Theo over here into the booth for an interview. But yeah, good stuff there, winning that game with the green machine.
Yeah, and that was kind of expected. We talked about how the Incarnation deck is pretty sweet. It's a really cool deck. It's got a lot of Chain of the Rocks and ways to kind of attack the early creature, small creature decks. But its one weakness is the fact that it's quite bad against mono green devotion, because it's it doesn't have a ton of ways to interact with stuff like on the stack. There's no counter spells for Karn the Great Creator, and it also doesn't have a lot of catch up mechanisms. There's no sweepers or anything like that. So you know if you fall behind a couple elves and a cavalier or something like that, it's really hard to catch back up. And also, it doesn't produce a fast game plan. Even the fastest game plan that it probably has, the fastest nut draw, I guess, is the binding into incarnation curve. And in best case scenario, you're getting something like an agent. I guess to be fair, if we did see a turn 4 incarnation that game, I think that game is, James is by a landslide, right? With the stealing the land with the 2 havens on it. So
Yeah, it is weird. Sometimes we always think about green, and as Magic players too, we think about things, and they're like always kind of the worst case scenario. We always have the things on curve, but in reality, games don't really play out like that. And you actually have a fair number of games like Theo had there, where it's like, well, I don't have the turn 1 elf, but I've got 2 Wolfwillow Havens and a Kiora, and that's a lot of mana, so I'll keep that. And it would have been a tad too slow in that situation normally, but kind of worked out where on the other side, James didn't have all the cards that they needed to stop that from happening, in the same exact way. So something that kind of happens a good bit in Magic. But yeah, mono green, kind of good. You think?
yeah, you think this deck is pretty good? I
I'm
think
starting to think it's kinda
generating
good.
it's weird because Theo didn't really have like the busted green draws that we're kind of used to seeing by this point, but just enough stuff and have enough value off of the Karn, and it was eventually able to kind of get to that combo turn and kind of bide some time a little bit. The Beseiju helped out a
Yeah,
lot
let's go
too.
talk to Theo though and see what's up with him and get his word on everything.
All right.
Congratulations, Theo, on winning round 3. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good. 3-0. Appreciate it.
Nice.
Yeah.
How are you liking the green machine? We have a hot take here in the booth. We think this deck might be good.
Well, I think it might be good too. Yeah. So I've tried a lot of stuff in Pioneer. I've basically done everything I can to avoid playing green, and there doesn't really seem to be a compelling reason not to at the moment. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's how I
Yeah, I was
landed
gonna
on
I was
this
I
next
was gonna
choice.
ask you that. Did you consider anything else at all for this event, or were you just kind of locked in on mono green?
I wanted to play Phoenix, but I think its red-black matchup is a little too poor, and I thought about mono white for a while, but I know that deck has its own issues too. But
Mhm.
yeah.
How's your NRG in general going? You having a fun time today, hanging out with your friends. How's it going?
Oh yeah. These things are always fun. A lot of friends I know are here, so and I got to play a team event with someone I haven't seen in years. Like, it's one of my friends that I grew up with. He recently moved to Chicago, so I said, "Hey, why don't you play a team energy with me and Alex Rubin?" And yeah,
That's awesome. And so
that
it's
was a
that's
great
kind of
time.
yeah, it's kind of what the dream's all about, right? Like you go and you play with your friends and do well. And
Yeah,
as we know, you're no stranger to doing well in the team events here at the NRG circuit.
yeah. Yesterday didn't go so hot, but yeah, the last team event I played in St. Louis, I did manage to take home the dub.
We do love.
Yeah,
Uh,
did okay for yourself in that one. We have a very important question that I think we're going to make this a segment at this point for all of our interviewees.
all right,
Give me your thoughts on the restaurant Chipotle.
all right. Hmm. I don't agree with Will Kruger in the fact that it's the best restaurant, all factors considered, but it's a solid meal. It's like a healthy mix of like carbs, protein,
Mhm.
and flavor. So yeah, I'm a
Yeah,
Chipotle fan. Got nothing against it. A solid like 7 out of 10.
that's good.
Yeah.
Hey, 7 out of 10 ain't bad. I'm not wagging a finger
Uh,
at that any day. But
I
what
mean,
about you, kind of outside Magic? Let the players get to know you a little bit. We're going to be seeing you at the Energy Champs at the end of the year. You're one of our
yeah,
qualified players. Congrats for that. What's the day in the life for you look like?
yeah. So I work as a software tester at Epic, which is like health software company.
Hmm,
So yeah. That's what I
cool,
do.
awesome.
I go in, make sure stuff works, and yeah, other things I like to do are I'm a big tennis guy. Play a lot of
Love
that.
tennis.
Work
How do you
out.
feel about Federer retiring? Did it hurt?
Oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, I've been watching Federer play for basically all of my childhood, growing up. Basically, his like my entire lifetime. Federer was on the big screen playing. So yeah, his retirement was big news. It really felt like like you look at something happening and you really felt that like time has passed. Yeah.
Hmm. I feel that too. My family is a big tennis family. My dad is kind of like a Federer simp, for lack of a better word. He has like the Federer like clothes and everything, and so it was like
he
a
got
very
the-
somber. Like I called him because I knew he'd be emotional about it. I was like, "Are you okay, Dad?" And he was like, "Yeah, it just kind of sucks, you know. Like I think he could have played another year, but I get it, you know." So
Yeah, he's got the RF hat and everything.
he really does. Yeah. Well, Theo, are you excited for the next couple rounds? Because you're in kind of a good position to get another top 8 here.
Yeah, I'm hoping to, you know, keep it going. You know, green has served me really well today. I hope to keep winning these coin flips, and yeah.
Nice. Okay, if you had to avoid one deck, I should say, sorry, you don't want to play a matchup. What's the one matchup you're dreading to see next round?
I guess Spirits is the deck that I've had a lot of trouble with. So Mono Blue Spirits, Banned Spirits. It's the deck I'd prefer not to see.
Sure.
Yeah.
And how about on the other side of that coin? What's the deck that you want to play
I want to play against. I think Rakdos deck. That matchup is very good for green. So I know Doomlake.
Killing me with that answer, Theo.
I think Rakdos deck is unique that it's like very good against the rest of the format, but I don't think it's very good against green. So yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It hurts me. It hurts me to say that, but I agree.
Yeah, it's a weird little piece of the format, you know. I can beat everything but green, but then everyone shows up. You know, we see like 20% of the field be green, like it is today.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a hard recipe to crack.
Yeah.
Well,
for sure.
Theo, thank you so much for joining us in the booth. Hopefully, we'll see you here later today in the booth with us in top 8 and winning it up. But for now, go have fun with your friends.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, we're hopping back here and we'll see you later, buddy. But yeah, it was great to have Theo on. You know, one of the players who is going to be in our NRG championship here at the end of the year, qualified earlier with Connor and Max at the last St. Louis Showdown event. So if you want to do that, make sure to come out to the Louisville Showdown event in December 10th and 11th. That is your last chance to get in if you're not kind of close in the leaderboard point race. You're going to make sure to do that. It's a 15K modern event. So that's going to be a lot of prizes on the line. Even if you don't end up making it to our champ event, that is a lot of stuff that you can get. And Sunday, we're going to have a Pioneer 5K trial. And this is good into the Brothers War format. We're going to have a little bit of time. So, you know, players like us are kind of rushing to figure out and get cards. But NRG is going to be there and have all the cards for you on site. Plenty of time for the set to be out. So you can play the best deck of the deck you want to play for sure. And check out the NRG booth to do that. However, though, we are going to take a little bit of a break here. It is time for us to give a little bit of time between rounds, get the next feature match set up. It's going to be about 5 or 6 minutes. So, hey, go get some water. Click that follow button if you haven't already on Twitch. Maybe drop us a Twitch Prime if you have it. But that way, you don't miss anything. You know, sometimes I understand you click away for a second, you go and you check out, you're like, oh, League of Legends World Finals. And then you come back here. But if you click that follow button, it'll be right there on your tab. And Devin and I will be back here with you in just a couple minutes.